Okay, we're going to start your notes over Reconstruction after the Civil War. Okay, Reconstruction is the time period that kind of follows the Civil War. It's the time of rebuilding after the war is over. I'm going to start out with just a little review. April 9th, 1865, Robert E. Lee surrenders at Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia. Like that was the last event or the last battle of the Civil War. And at that time, the Civil War ends. Right after the Civil War ends, the period of Reconstruction begins. And Reconstruction lasts from 1865 until 1867. And like I said earlier, Reconstruction refers to kind of like the time of rebuilding and the time of fixing the problems that came up after the Civil War. And it lasted until 1877. The Reconstruction Plan was thought of and was constructed by Abraham Lincoln, but on April 14th, just a few short days after the surrender at Appomattox Courthouse, Abraham Lincoln is shot by John Wilkes Booth at Ford Theater. So Andrew Johnson is sworn in as president. Reconstruction really aimed to fix certain problems that were going on after the Civil War. Integrating freedmen into society was one of those problems. Helping them transition from slaves to free men. Also readmitting Southern states into the Confederacy. How were they going to do that? Were they just going to allow them to be back in? Were there certain conditions that they had to follow? Decreasing the debt that was caused by war. There was lots of debt that was acquired after the Civil War. Also property damage and land and all those things that happened. That was what Reconstruction aimed to fix. There are different people and different groups that make up part of Reconstruction. One of those groups was the Radical Republicans. They were the Republicans in Congress who were extremely pro-Reconstruction. They supported what was known as Radical Reconstruction. A lot of these people believed that Andrew Johnson's plan was way too lenient because he issued lots of pardons and really was not too hard on the South. He was very lenient at first. And that's why the South really took advantage of him at first and implemented laws like the Black Codes and did not follow the codes of Reconstruction to a T. Radical Republicans really supported a strict punishment for the South, that the South needed to pay for what they had done for seceding, and they needed to pay or to go through some strenuous circumstances to get back into the Union. Another group of people were known as the carpetbaggers, and those were Northerners who would oftentimes come to the South to seek land, to come and live in the South, sometimes seeking jobs after the Civil War. A lot of carpetbaggers came down as educators and teachers to work in the freedmen schools, and they were Northerners that came down to the South, and they weren't called carpetbaggers because they would oftentimes have these carpet-covered suitcases. Scallywags, they were the white Southerners who opposed the Confederacy. So these were white Southerners who lived in the South, but they didn't support slavery and they did not support the Confederacy during the Civil War. And the Freedmen's Bureau, that was an organization that was set up in order to help the freedmen in the South kind of transition into society. They oftentimes helped with trials for African Americans. They oftentimes helped with schools. The Freedmen's Bureau set up lots of public schools for African Americans to try and educate them and teach them how to read and write, which was prohibited during the Civil War in the time before that. So all of these people, all of these groups kind of made up unique parts of Reconstruction. Reconstruction in the South was a really interesting thing because it was all about how to rebuild the South and how to get them back into the Union. During Reconstruction, Andrew Johnson was pretty lenient on the South. He didn't require a whole lot of. He didn't require them to do a whole lot of things to get back into the Union. So the South immediately passed laws in order to limit the rights of the African Americans or the freedmen who had just become assimilated into society, and those laws were known as the Black Codes. And the Black Codes were really just, they limited the rights of African Americans and kind of created a quasi-slavery or kind of a fake slavery to make sure that the African Americans knew that just because they had been freed, they still were not equals in society. This really made Congress upset because Congress was controlled by mainly Republicans. So this really made Congress upset and kind of made them see, okay, the South is not playing by the rules. So the South was placed under military law. They were split up into 5 military districts. All of the governors, all of the state governments were dissolved, and military law was put in place, martial law. So no Southerner, no Confederate could hold office or vote, or I should say no Southerner because it was no longer split, but no Southerner could hold office or vote. Scalawags, carpetbaggers, and radical Republicans were the ones who controlled the power in Congress during this time. This is just a map of the military districts in the South, how they split them up. And each military district had its own government appointed by the United States. So this just kind of shows you how the South was ruled during Reconstruction. As each state took the necessary steps in order to be admitted into the Union, then the troops would be withdrawn and that state would be admitted into the Union. But the United States government did not withdraw troops until 1877 from all the states. If you don't hear anything I say about Reconstruction, I definitely want you to hear this. There were 3 amendments passed during the Civil War, and they were the Civil War Amendments. It was the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment to the United States Constitution. We've talked about them in class. Hopefully you guys have gotten these in 8th grade. The first is the 13th Amendment, and that abolished slavery in the United States, so it freed the slaves. The second was the 14th Amendment, and it just guaranteed civil rights and citizenship to all former slaves. And the wording just says all human beings born in the United States would now be citizens regardless of their color. So it gave African Americans citizenship under the law. So they became citizens. And the 15th Amendment guaranteed the voting right for all males regardless of their color. So it guaranteed voting rights for all former slaves. So you have free citizens vote. And that's what you need to use to remember this. Just free citizens vote. What do free citizens do? They vote. Who votes? Free citizens. So that's a good way to remember the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. In 1877, Reconstruction ends. All of the troops are withdrawn from the South, and the Southern states throughout this time were being readmitted into the Union and being reissued representation in Congress. After this time, the South passes the Jim Crow laws, and the Jim Crow laws, they were just segregation laws that were put into place that created a separate but equal living circumstances, and those actually lasted until 1865 with the Civil Rights Movement. And some of the Jim Crow laws, as you guys know, they implemented segregation in schools, but they also did things like literacy tests and poll taxes on voting to kind of inhibit the African Americans from being able to vote because they would have to pay a poll tax or they would have to pass a literacy test. And the literacy tests were rather difficult, so it was there to limit the rights of African Americans kind of more indirectly than the Black Codes did. Okay, these are your Reconstruction notes. If you have any questions, you need to come to me in class. This is just an FYI. I wanted to let you guys know that your Civil War test will now be the Monday after spring break. So it is no longer on Friday, but it is going to be on Monday. So on Friday, we will review for the test, and then the Monday after spring break, you will take your Civil War test. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know, and I will see you guys on Friday.